You stayed. When they hurt you. When they lied. When they disappeared and came back like nothing happened. You stayed. Not because you were weak, but because you're loyal. Too loyal. And if no one else says it, let me be the first. That loyalty is destroying you. If you've ever loved someone more than they loved you, like this video. Because someone else out there needs to know they're not the only one. And if you're tired of breaking your own heart to protect someone else's, subscribe. Because what you're about to hear might be the thing that finally sets you free. They say loyalty is a virtue. But Carl Jung would have said this: what you fail to confront in yourself, you'll keep seeking in others. And that's the real truth no one told you. You're not just loyal. You're loyal to patterns, to pain that feels familiar, to people who mirror your wounds, not your worth. You think staying means you're strong, that walking away is giving up. But deep down, you know you've been breaking yourself just to keep others whole. You've mistaken loyalty for identity, for love, for proof that you're not the kind of person who leaves. But ask yourself honestly, how many times have you stayed just to avoid being the bad one? How many times have you let yourself bleed dry just to prove you were good enough to keep? Loyalty becomes poison the moment it's one-sided. But people like you, the ones who love deeply, who always see the best in others, who always forgive just one more time, you don't stop until it's too late. Until the damage isn't just emotional, it's spiritual. You lose your voice, your fire, your sense of self, because loyalty taught you how to stay, but not how to leave. Jung called this a complex, a psychological trap formed in childhood. Maybe you were loyal because someone once left you. So now you overcommit just to avoid feeling abandoned again. You prove you're worthy by enduring what should have never been tolerated. You're not loving, you're overcompensating. And the worst part, you don't even know you're doing it. That's why this hurts so much, because it's not just about them. It's about you. The younger you, the one who learned, if I stay, maybe I'll finally be enough. But Carl Jung would say, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. So you keep attracting the same kind of people. Ones who take, ones who expect, ones who know you'll always stay, no matter what they do. But loyalty doesn't heal you. It only delays the collapse. Because one day, you'll wake up in a life you don't recognize, surrounded by people you never should have let stay this long. And the scariest part? You'll blame yourself. You weren't born too loyal. You were conditioned to be. Somewhere along the way, you learned that joy is something you earn by enduring. That pain is a price worth paying, as long as someone stays. And that belief didn't come from nowhere. It came from early moments you probably can't even name anymore. Moments where silence felt safer than speaking, where pleasing others meant avoiding punishment, where staying invisible meant survival. Carl Jung called this the shadow self, the part of you that holds all the traits you couldn't safely express. And sometimes, that shadow is where your anger lives, your boundaries, your ability to say, this isn't love, this is control. But if you grew up in an environment where love felt conditional, where peace depended on you being easy to handle, then your shadow learned this: to be loved, I must not leave. So you stayed, even when it hurt, even when it made you small, even when it made you sick. And every time you stayed, you fed the part of you that confuses pain with loyalty. That's how the pattern was born. You weren't loyal because you were kind. You were loyal because walking away once meant losing everything. Maybe it was a parent who only gave affection when you were good. Maybe it was a partner who taught you that conflict equals abandonment. Maybe it was life itself that punished you for having needs. But over time, you internalized this message. If I'm always available, they won't leave. That's not love. That's emotional survival. Jung would have said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And that includes staying in relationships that mimic the original wound, just so you don't have to face what's underneath, the fear of being truly alone. So you stayed busy fixing them. You stayed busy proving your worth. You stayed busy being useful, supportive, dependable, anything but honest. Because honesty would have sounded like, I'm not okay with this. I need more. I can't keep doing this. And deep down, you didn't believe you had the right to say those things. Loyalty becomes toxic when it silences you. You don't fear losing them. You fear losing the version of you who tried so hard to keep them. The version who thought, if I just love harder, maybe they'll finally see me. But Carl Jung warned, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. You can't become that person by betraying yourself every day. So what do? How do you stop being too loyal? It starts with one decision. You choose yourself, even if it breaks your heart. Because real loyalty, the kind that builds peace, not pain, begins inside you. You become loyal to your needs, to your boundaries, to your peace, to your growth. And that might mean walking away from people who've known the old version of you, the version who always said yes, the version who always forgave, the version who never left. And they might call you selfish. They might say you changed. But you didn't change. You remembered who you were before you learned to stay silent. One day, you stop replying. You stop explaining. You stop fixing. And the people who took your loyalty for granted start calling you cold. But they never saw the part of you that broke every time you stayed. They never saw the emotional funeral you held in silence every time you chose them over you. That's the collapse no one talks about. Letting go doesn't feel empowering at first. It feels like dying. You grieve the love you gave. You grieve the version of you that always tried. You grieve the hope that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. And that grief doesn't come in one wave. It comes in hundreds, randomly, quietly. While brushing your teeth, walking home, trying to sleep. You don't just lose them. You lose the identity you built around them. The fixer, the forgiver, the one who stayed. And in that emptiness, you ask, who am I now, if I'm not needed? Carl Jung would have said, you are what you do, not what you say you'll do. And that's where rebirth begins. Not with words, not with promises, but with actions that say, I choose me now. At first, it feels selfish. You'll second-guess everything. You'll wonder if maybe you overreacted, if maybe you should have just stayed quiet again. But that's the voice of the old you, the one trained to survive pain, not escape it. You don't owe your loyalty to the version of you who tolerated what hurt. You owe it to the version of you who's still healing, the one who finally said, enough. But there's a cost to breaking the pattern. You lose people. You lose the chaos. You lose the emotional highs and lows you confused for love. You wake up and realize you don't miss them. You miss the hope they represented, the illusion that if you just loved enough, proved enough, stayed enough, you'd finally be chosen. That hope is gone now, and in its place is something scarier, but more honest: reality. This is where most people go back. They go back to what hurt, to what was familiar, because loneliness is terrifying, and guilt whispers, maybe they weren't that bad. Maybe it was your fault. But Carl Jung would say, loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. You weren't wrong to leave. You were just finally able to hear your own voice. And now, you're learning how to trust it. Here's what happens next. The silence gets louder. But so does your self-respect. The regret stings, but so does the reminder that you're rebuilding something real. The emptiness lingers, but it makes space for something new. A version of you that doesn't trade loyalty for scraps of love. You start saying no without guilt. You stop over-explaining. You stop chasing closure. Because you realize you don't need to be understood to be right. You don't need to be forgiven to move on. You don't need their approval to choose yourself. And for the first time, you feel free. Not happy, not perfect, but free. You finally did it. You walked away. You stopped answering texts. You stopped showing up for someone who never showed up for you. You chose yourself. And yet, here it comes. The guilt. It creeps in like a whisper. You abandoned them. They needed you. You were all they had. It makes you question your healing. It makes you feel like the villain in a story where you were always the one bleeding. But that guilt isn't real. It's borrowed, inherited, internalized. It was passed down from every time you were told, don't make things difficult. Just let it go. Be the bigger person. Keep the peace. And so you became the peacekeeper. Even in a war you didn't start, even when you were the only one getting hurt. Carl Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life, and you will call it fate. That guilt? That's your unconscious, telling you that loyalty means self-sacrifice, that love means enduring pain, that your needs are a threat to other people's comfort. But here's the truth. You're not guilty for choosing peace. You're not wrong for refusing to stay where you were being emotionally drained. You're not cruel for walking away from chaos. Still, guilt has a way of disguising itself as compassion. You start remembering their good moments, the late-night talks, the I'm sorries, the glimpses of hope. You start thinking, what if they're really trying? What if no one else will stay with them? But pause. Ask yourself, why is your love only validated by your pain? Why does being a good person require abandoning yourself every time? You feel bad for leaving, because they never felt bad for making you want to. That's the disconnect. You're grieving someone who doesn't even know what they took from you. You're crying over someone who still doesn't see the version of you that was dying to be understood. You didn't leave because you stopped loving them. You left because you finally started loving yourself, just a little more. But here's the hardest part of growth. It doesn't feel good right away. You expect liberation. You get loneliness. You expect clarity. You get doubt. You expect freedom. You get silence. Because healing doesn't rush in the moment you walk away. It waits until you stop trying to run back to the thing that broke you. You'll want to check on them. You'll want to see if they changed. You'll want to make sure they're okay, even if you're not. But you're not their protector anymore. You never should have been. Let them face their reflection. Let them learn what losing you really means. Because this time, you're not coming back. Carl Jung believed the soul wants integration, not perfection. And that means sitting in this discomfort without fixing it, letting the guilt exist without obeying it, letting the loneliness speak without running from it, letting the silence echo without trying to fill it with someone else. You're not a bad person for wanting peace. You're not heartless for saying enough. You're not broken for needing space to rebuild. You're just finally seeing yourself clearly. And what you're seeing is someone who deserves loyalty from themselves. So here's your challenge now. Can you stay gone? Can you survive the urge to fix what almost killed you? Can you let the guilt pass through without turning around? Because beyond this guilt is your freedom. Beyond this emptiness is your real identity. And beyond this silence is a voice you haven't heard in years. Yours. You've spent years trying to prove your worth keeping. But now you realize it was never about being chosen. It was about choosing yourself. And that changes everything. Because once you stop begging for love, once you stop making pain your personality, once you stop mistaking suffering for strength, you become dangerous. Not to others, but to every version of yourself that settled for less. So what does real loyalty look like now? It looks like boundaries without explanation. It looks like peace without guilt. It looks like waking up and asking, what do I need today? Not what do they want from me? You stop justifying your silence. You stop apologizing for your distance. You stop rescuing people from the chaos they chose to live in. Because the healed version of you doesn't need chaos to feel alive. They don't need drama to feel needed. They don't need to be broken to feel valuable. They just need to be loyal to their peace. Carl Jung believed that real growth comes when you integrate the parts of yourself you've rejected. That means reclaiming your anger, your power, your voice, your right to walk away. The parts you were told were too much. Those were the exact parts that could have saved you. Now they will, because the new you isn't interested in being liked. You're interested in being free. You don't stay quiet so others can feel loud. You don't stay small so others don't feel insecure. You don't stay just because you always have. Now, you stay only when you're respected, when you're safe, when it's mutual. And that is real loyalty. It's not about how long you stayed with someone else. It's about how long you're willing to stay with yourself, even when it gets hard, even when it's lonely, even when walking away from them means walking through grief. Because at the end of the day, you're the only person you'll never leave. So you might as well become someone worth staying with. Let this be the moment. You stop chasing people who confuse love with control. You stop proving your worth to people who benefit from your silence. You stop loving others so loudly that you forget to love yourself at all. You are no longer the one who stays by default. You're the one who chooses. And from now on, you choose peace. If this video broke something open inside you, like it, so someone else who's too loyal can find it too. Subscribe, because this is your space now, for truth, for healing, for strength. And if you've ever betrayed yourself just to feel loved, comment below. I'm choosing me now. Let the world read it. Let your old self hear it. Let this be the first promise you keep to yourself.